Hello, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. Today, a little bit of a rant video. I'm going to be talking about both vinyl and CD album variants. It's not a new phenomenon, but it's grown exponentially. And basically, my point is, listen, is it a ripoff to the diehard fans? Is it a cheat to the Billboard album charts? Or is it a necessity because most people are not buying physical medium, so the way to keep it alive is by forcing the diehard fans to buy multiple copies of an album. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and I'm definitely curious about your opinions on this. If you're new to my channel, please hit subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it and help my channel to grow. Now, album variants are not a new thing. And again, we're talking about variants. We're not talking about reissues. Listen, I have like 9 versions of Sticky Fingers. I have multiple copies of every Stones album, and Who album, and Kinks album, and Genesis, and Zeppelin. You get the idea. But those are reissues. Those are remastered. They sound differently. They might have bonus tracks. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when they release a new album, and in the olden days, 95% of the time, they released one version of the album, and if you wanted to buy it, you went out and bought it. Now, it's crazy what's going on. Let's look at a little bit of a history. It's not a totally new thing. Back in 1978, the Stones released Some Girls, one of their best albums. Now, Some Girls, actually, a lot of people don't realize, it did have different variants. Now, the original release, which is what this was when I bought it when it came out, the day it came out, of course, had the full cover. And the Stones were either sued or threatened to be sued by Lucille Ball and others, and they had to redo the cover. And then they had to redo the cover with those people blacked out. Pretty amazing, right? But that's not a variant. What the variant is the colors. Even on the original version, you can get Some Girls in a different color scheme. A lot of people don't realize that. The thing is that when this came out in 1978, I'm telling you, nobody gave a shit. I didn't give a shit. The only point was I'm going to go buy Some Girls. And this was the one that I got. But it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like a big choice which color. I wound up getting this also when they had to redo the cover because it was completely different. And this became kind of historic. But there was a color variant there, even back in 1978. What I thought the Stones would do, which was clever, in 1980, their follow-up studio record, Emotional Rescues, had tons of different album covers, but it really didn't. It only had one. What they did was it came with a poster that folded out. And on that poster, when they put the album together in the shrink wrap, it may have this cover, it may have had this cover, it may have had a different cover, and it was in the shrink wrap, and that's what you saw. But the album itself was always the same. So it's kind of a variant, but it really was only one album that, in a sense, you were going to buy if you were going to buy that album. They weren't forcing you to buy a ton. The first variant that I could really remember is this legendary one, Led Zeppelin, 1979, In Through the Outdoor. Now, this is the CD version of the one that I have. But what Led Zeppelin did was they released 6 different album covers. And those were the 6. And in fact, that's the one that I just showed you that I have on CD. But the really interesting thing, and to Zeppelin's credit, it wasn't forcing people to buy multiple copies to collect all 6, because the original album came in a brown paper bag. So there was no way you could know which cover you were going to get. You could buy it 6 times. You could buy it 20 times. You may wind up with the same cover over and over again. So they weren't forcing you necessarily to buy each cover, although later editions, when it didn't have the brown paper bag, I guess maybe it was. But initially it wasn't. It was a graphic design idea and a really smart idea. And basically what it was different. The whole action of the album cover took place in a bar, and it was a different shot, a different camera angle of what was going on. Clever artwork, clever design. It was not to try to rip off the fans. But then it's just grown exponentially. Now, sometimes an artist doesn't have a choice. Here's another Rolling Stones example. They had released a live album, not a very good one, called Live Licks. And this one, the girl has a bra on, a bathing suit or a bra. There's another version where she's topless. And that was just because I guess some retailers wouldn't cover it. But there was only 2 versions of that, and that's the one I'm showing you. But then all of a sudden, it started growing. When The Who released Endless Wire, which I am not a fan of, you could check out one of my many Who videos. There's a lot of different versions they released of this album. It's still stiffed. It didn't do well. This one came with a bonus live DVD with 5 live songs from Lions. And then the album is over there. But there's a lot of different versions of Endless Wire. None of this helped the album to be a big commercial success. Speaking of The Who, their last studio record, just called Who, what they did and what a lot of people are doing is they release an album. This is the version I originally bought, and this version had 3 bonus tracks, but it cost more money. So what a lot of these bands do, they release it at one time. You can choose which one you want to buy. The one with more songs costs a couple extra dollars, or spend a little bit less, get less songs. I think it's a ridiculous idea. It's supposed to be a piece of work. What's the work? You put it together, and that's what you sell as a product, not a shorter version and a longer version. It kind of pissed me off. But of course, I'm going to get the longer version because I want all the songs. I'm a completist. But that wasn't enough for the band. Then they played this legendary kind of acoustic set at a club in Kingston upon Thames, and I was actually at that show, even though I live here in Long Island. I actually was lucky enough to get into that show across the pond, and then they released another version of this with a bonus disc of songs from that live show. So I had to buy this album twice. Paul McCartney is a king of doing this. This was an album he did new. Same idea. This had 12 new songs, 2 bonus tracks. So if you spend more money, you get 2 bonus tracks. There was a red version of this album that had less songs. I bought the longer one because I have to have everything by McCartney. Egypt Station, multiple variants of this album. This happens to be the one that I have with the belly band. And how many songs? 16 songs on this. McCartney took the cake on McCartney 3. Somebody who's a McCartney expert, you could tell me it's got to be close to 25, 30 versions of that. And it's the same album, McCartney 3. It's just that the color graphics on the cover is a different color dye, and the vinyl, multiple versions. Now, there's a guy that I know who's got a very successful YouTube channel, and he's a huge McCartney fan, and I run into him at the record store a lot. And he was bitching about what McCartney was doing. It was a ripoff, and he's ripping off his diehard fans to make them buy multiple copies. And then at one point he was saying he wasn't going to do it. But of course he bought virtually all of them. And you didn't even open them. You don't open them. What are you going to do? Play 30 different versions of the same album? And they just filed away. Now, I'm not faulting him. I'm a collector too. But it was just ridiculous. And, clearly it's McCartney pushing to have a hugely successful album. And he wanted a number 1 album. Would have been his first since Flowers in the Dirt. And it was. He got a number 1 album in England. I think in America, McCartney 3 was number 2. But certainly that's because he had like 20, 30 different versions of that album up for sale. And people who were McCartney fans were collecting them like baseball cards. If he released one version, would he have had a number 1 or number 2 album? No. So it's kind of a cheat, and it pissed me off. And I didn't buy McCartney 3, and I still don't have it to this day, and it's the only McCartney album I don't have. Now, eventually I'll get it when I find it used. But that's like a really annoying thing. Here's Lana Del Rey. This was number 1 album, Ultraviolence. I have 1 version of this album. And apparently this one's pretty worth something because this has 4 bonus tracks. And this is called the Deluxe Edition, Target Edition. I got it at a used record store. But apparently this was from Target. And this version from Target had 1 song that nobody else had. And then there's another version from maybe Best Buy or wherever. You get the idea. They're releasing multiple versions of albums. Even the new Taylor Swift album that I just did a review for. Not so bad in a sense. There's 4 different vinyl versions, 4 different covers, different shades of vinyl, 4 different CD versions. And you can see the artwork here. It has like numbers. And the idea is they want you to buy all 4, or maybe all 8, depending if you want it on CD and vinyl, which I guess the Swifties are doing. And if you put it all together, it becomes a clock. And then you can buy separately from Taylor Swift for like $80. You could buy the clock and put it together, and you have the whole 4 albums as a clock, which you could display. So I guess you need the 4 to play, and then the 4 to put on the wall to make a clock out of it. You get the idea. You know, I mean, it just gets crazy. Another thing that certain bands do, and hopefully not too often, really pisses me off. They release an album. If you're a big fan, you get it when it comes out right away. Now, here's an album that Chrissie Hynde did called J.P. Chrissie and the Fairground Boys Fidelity. It's an album that's stiffed, but I love this album. It was one of my favorite top 3 albums of the year it came out. Now, initially, it had 11 songs. Fidelity was the last song. And the album didn't do well, but it was a great, great album. But what they did, months later, they released another version with bonus tracks and a bonus DVD. So then I got to buy it again to get that. And then I tossed the original version. So I had to buy it twice. And what you're doing is, who's buying that album? Apparently virtually nobody, but your biggest fans are buying it. So I guess to get some money back, you make your biggest fans who are supporting you buy it again. Is that really fair? I don't know. Even the Stones did it on Bigger Bang. Here's their Bigger Bang album, right? And then months after they released this album, what'd they do? They released a special edition. And what the special edition had was a bonus DVD. It had a couple extra songs on there, which completely sucks because you can only play the bonus songs on DVD. If you put the vinyl in, they're not there, which is ridiculous. It also had some videos and things like that and a live performance. But you made me buy it again. Now, I'm a big fan. I got multiple versions of Stones albums and Kinks, like I said, and The Who, box sets, but that's different. What we're talking about is forcing you, when the album is released, to buy multiple copies so you can get the different colored vinyl and different colored splatter. And personally, I don't get it. It's a record. You play it. But apparently you don't play it. Everybody buys these things and just collects them and puts them up on a shelf. And it's music. To me, the important thing is having the music. But as a completist, you debate, oh, should I get another copy? Should I get another copy? And I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way. And I know it rubs most people the wrong way. Even the guy I mentioned who bought like 20-something versions of McCartney 3. You know, he's like, don't judge me, and I'm not. You know, he works hard for his money. He can spend it on whatever he wants. So who's to say it's not right? But you know what? In his heart, when I talked to him, he knew it wasn't right. He knew that McCartney's doing that to get a higher chart placing and getting another #1 album, because that's what his ego was required. And if he only put out one version, it wouldn't have happened. And, you know, in a sense, forcing your diehard collectors, because you know they're going to buy it. You know, the answer is not, well, nobody put a gun to your head to buy them. Yeah, if you're a collector and you're a fanatic, you're going to buy it. And they know it. And they're taking advantage. And I know if you don't overanalyze it, you know it's wrong. And it's cheating, because the Billboard charts are supposed to be based on sales. Now, Taylor Swift would have certainly come in at #1, and she sold a bazillion albums in the first week. But maybe you should divide that by 4, or by 8, or by 16, because it's the same people buying multiple copies. How many people actually bought one copy? And that's a bigger idea of the true demographic, at least in my mind. Anyway, let me know what you think. Really curious, because it's only getting worse and worse and worse. Or better and better and better, I guess, if you're a collector and you just want to buy 30 different versions. I mean, somebody just told me the Red Hot Chili Peppers album has like 30 different vinyl versions, you know, to splatter. Listen, vinyl, colored vinyl's cool. I have a video of like bootleg colored vinyl from the 70s. It's cool. But realistically, it's like, what do? You put it on the turntable and you walk away. Do you stand there and stare at your colored vinyl spinning around? My hunch is that, like the guy I was talking about with the McCartney 3 albums, you don't even play them. You don't even open the shrink. You just stick them on the shelf. It's just kind of ridiculous, in my opinion. So what do you think? let me know. Please hit subscribe. Please check out my other videos. Most importantly, stay safe, stay healthy. And thanks for watching the Alan Rosenberg Show. Really appreciate it.